in the session that we're having in the next hour, we will look into the German case, and we will have 3 people to give us a bit of an insight in what is happening in the public engagement around radioactive waste management in Germany since all the problems appeared around the Asse 2 radioactive waste storage and the Mosleben radioactive waste storage, and of course after all the protests around the Gorleben project in the Wendland on the border of the former West and Eastern Germany. Germany made a restart of the entire process, and we will first listen to Mr. Jochen Ahlswede from the, let's say, the spill of the entire discussion that is now ongoing to see what to do with radioactive waste in Germany. The organization BASE, the Bundesanstalt für Sicher- und Lagerung. Jochen Ahlswede, I would like to give you the word, and I urge you to keep it short so that we also have ample time for the other speakers.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here and to give a brief overview over the German's new site selection and public participation process. Yes, as you all know, I'll try to make a brief overview, and as you all know, the policy regarding nuclear energy and nuclear waste management in Germany has a very controversial history. I think Mr. Habers already pointed out that in the past years, however, Germany has developed some fundamental new approaches to deal with the problem. Before I will go into details, I would like to briefly describe the societal background of this new approach. Shortly after the Fukushima accident, German Parliament decided to phase out of nuclear energy, and to do so until 2022. So they are legally binding fixed dates for the closure of nuclear power plants. As a result of that, no high-level waste from nuclear energy will be produced after this date, after 2022. And the debate regarding nuclear disposal, which was characterized by decades of confrontation and mistrust, was no longer overshadowed in Germany by the question of nuclear energy. So I think it's safe to say that this was a very crucial precondition for this new approach, for this new site selection process we have in Germany for the high-level radioactive waste. Okay, I will now go to the process itself. In 2017, Germany started a comparative site selection procedure for the geological repository. And basically it's really a completely new procedure with some main characteristics. We start from a wide map. So the whole surface of Germany is part of the search. It's a stepwise process with final decisions taken by Parliament. It's scientifically based, which means there are criteria, scientific criteria, which are laid down by law before the process begins or began. We have a broad public participation process. I will come to that later. We have a transparent process. We have obligations for every stakeholder to publish their information on a digital information platform, which is open to the public. And we have some obligations for evaluation and learning processes during the site selection procedure. The aim is to have a decision for the site with the best possible safety in 2031. So what happens during the process? You already seen this before in the session. It consists of basically 3 phases to narrow down the site with the best possible safety. During phase 1, Possible site regions are identified by assessing existing data. During the second phase, the operator will explore the bedrocks through exploratory drilling and seismic measurements. And during the third phase, there are underground explorations, and at the end, a final decision. At the end of each of those phases, the regulator, the base, it's my office, the Federal Office for the Safety of Nuclear Waste Management, will examine the suggestions of the operator. And at the end of each phase, the elected representatives of the German Parliament will decide. So it's not only the decision at the end, but also before, at the end of each phase. Who's involved in the search? Only a quick overview. So at the bottom you see there's the operator, the BGE. It's a federal company which is responsible for the implementation of the site selection. There's the federal office, the base, which has the role of the supervisory body and is responsible for the public participation process. And there's the National Civil Society Board, which is accompanying the procedure independently with focus on public participation. It has an own office, an own budget, so it's really an independent stakeholder in the process and consists of individual citizens and acknowledged public figures. And above that, we have the Federal Ministry and the German Parliament, which holds the political responsibility and takes and are involved in the final decision-making processes. Now, what happens in the public participation? The Site Selection Act stipulates indeed far-reaching opportunities for public participation. At the moment, you see it left here, there's the Sub-Areas Conference. Members of the public discuss the first interim report of the operator of the BGE and can make statements. The results of these processes will be recorded in a report, which the operator must take into account in its ongoing work. There are later in the process other forms of public participation mechanisms. For example, in every region designated for surface exploration, there will be one regional conference with also certain rights like filing statements, requesting scientific advice, demanding reviews, and information. They can inform the public. So this is really in the next phase in every region, which is a possible site region for the surface exploration, and there will be this conference. Also, there will be a Council of Regions, the so-called Council of Regions, which is a mediating body consisting of members of these regional conferences and of local communities in Germany where above-ground storage facilities for high-level radioactive waste already exists. We have, of course, also common procedures and public hearings at the end of each phase. So if you don't go to these conferences or councils, you have, as a citizen, you have also the right at the end of each phase for these public hearings and common procedures. I described here the formal processes. Now I'll come to the informal public participation and information and consultation processes. There's an obligation that every institution, every stakeholder in the process can do, and is invited to offer informal opportunities for public participation information processes. Here are also only some examples of what the base, the federal office, is doing, but the other actors, the operator, the civil society board, they are also doing their own informal, they offer their own informal opportunities for public participation. In case of the base here, it's, for example, mobile exhibitions, dialogue with local authorities, information material, annual status conferences, scientific conferences, web and social media. So you see, we try to make more of the of the formal process which is laid down by law. Coming now to an end, what is the status quo of the search? The BGE, the operator, has published the sub-areas interim report in September 2020. This is the first progress statement of the company which names those areas in Germany that are expected to have favorable geological conditions. I think the next, my colleagues in the next session will go into detail for that. But here we have really a really first progress statement. And in order to discuss this interim report with the public, my office has started the first formal public participation format. This is the sub-areas conference I already mentioned. The goal is to involve the public at a very early stage. At the moment, 55% of the German surface are part of this report with favorable geological conditions. You see, it's a very, very early stage. And the conference, the sub-areas conference, consists of representatives of regional authorities, members of the public, scientists, representatives of societal organizations. Of course, the first session of the conference was held in Corona times. We started with the opening meeting, which has a preparatory function in October 2020. Of course, we couldn't do a person-to-person conference, but we started the sub-areas conference. It was, of course, a very huge challenge for all stakeholders. We had already these discussions about it, how to start this conference in times of Corona. But we did not want to postpone public information and participation. So we accepted the challenge and organized a hybrid, mostly digital, two-day conference with a few hundred participants to discuss the first report of the operator. And the conference will continue in February, April, and June 2021. So the discussion that will then continue and go into further detail to assess the report of the operator. Yes, thank you very much. The next slide, you see my address. If you have any questions, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Jochen, Ahlswede. Thank you also for being so concise and for giving us a good overview of what we can now expect. I would now like to ask two representatives from the implementing organization, Ms. Astrid Goebel and Ms. Dagmar Dehmer, to inform us about how the developments look from their side.
Thank you for the floor, and Dagmar Dehmer and me will be pleased to contribute the BGE's view in the German session today. Founded in 2016, BGE is implementer and responsible for the implementation of the German radioactive waste disposal program. As German waste management organization, we are responsible for operating and closing the Ahlswede repository mine and operating and closing the Asse mine with retrieval of the waste before closure, operating the Gorleben mine according to the Site Selection Act, and operating the Konrad mine and constructing on-site a repository for low-level waste. Yes, of course, we are implementer of the site selection procedure that we will give information and focus in this talk today. Furthermore, we have taken over the responsibility for a sovereign task with our product control. Here we are engaged in pre-disposal management tasks, for example, the definition of waste acceptance criteria and approval of disposal containers. Well, BGE is a huge company, I think. We have now around 2,000 employees, but of course, this figure includes the colleagues working directly in the repository mines and on the construction sites. Well, this is putting our disposal projects into the context of the URAT disposal program phases. So you get a good overview of the stages of our disposal projects. Today we want to focus on the site selection for a repository site for high-level waste. I think what is worth to mention, because this is special, is that in Germany, for all radioactive waste types, low level, intermediate level, high level waste, it is considered to be best and safe solution to disposal in deep geological formations. And so it is decided for all types of radioactive waste. Then, well, we have heard a lot before from the previous German speakers about the restart of our site selection procedure. So I will try to keep it short. There was a restart of the search for a repository site for high-level waste. And in 2013, the Site Selection Act came into force. The act was reviewed by a heterogeneous composed nuclear waste management commission, and taking their recommendations and the Commission's report into consideration, the Site Selection Act was revised in 2017, and in the same year, 2017, the site selection procedure was launched then. Yes, well, we had such a visualization shown from the previous speaker, Jochen Ahlswede. I think I can skip it. I am happy that there are only slight differences, I think. Okay, here we have mentioned too the establishment of the National Advisory Board, and I think right after our talk, Mr. Leinen will contribute the NPG's view to today. I am very pleased to present this slide because with the publication of the sub-areas interim report on schedule on the 28th September in 2020, we achieved our first key milestone. Core document is the synthesis report of around 440 pages. And well, for a quick view, there is a summary available. It is available in English too. The synthesis report itself is right now in translation. There have been published several further underlying and underpinning documents giving information about the application of the minimum requirements according to the section 22 of the Site Selection Act and the minimum requirements and the geoscientific weighing criteria, 23 and 24 section of the Site Selection Act. And furthermore, we have published information about our data and databases. They are available too. Just a few words about the results. The sub-areas are defined as areas that we expect to offer favorable geological conditions for a safe disposal of high-level waste. And we have now identified with the interim report 90 sub-areas. We have taken into consideration the 3 host rock types, rock salt, clay rock, and crystalline rock. And so now we have identified 74 rock salt areas, sub-areas, most of them salt domes, and 9 clay rock sub-areas and 9 sub-areas in crystalline rock. And well, to make it really easy accessible, and we have accompanying to the documents published an interactive map giving information, detailed information about the identified areas and the sub-areas. And with this, I am talking about interactivity. I am pleased to pass the floor to my colleague, Dagmar Dehmer, who is going to give you some more information about BGE's approach and BGE's communication on the sub-areas, interim report on the sub-areas and related issues. I will remain at your disposal for questions, and thank you.
We try to give information on all levels where information can be given. So with the projects Astrid mentioned at the beginning, we have information centers we are running. It's free at the mines or near the mines. We offer all kinds of dialogue there. Right now, of course, not so much because Corona is really preventing people from coming there and preventing my colleagues to work there. So they are working at home most of the time right now and try to build up online exhibitions to give at least an idea what's going on down there. We have around 4 to 5 times a year we go out and have discussions as regards Asse or Konrad or Morsleben and give information about the actual topics that are running there and that are discussed in the public. The information platform was already mentioned by Jochen Ahlswede. We sent quite a bunch of documents there to give an insight into what's going on in the site selection process. And the presentation of the interim report on the first conference Jochen Ahlswede already mentioned is online available. Actually, I think it is seen quite often. So people are looking into it and try to find their topics in it. I'm not sure if they are successful with that because it's 3 days of documentation, but at least they might find something there. We have on the BGE side several of short explanation videos produced. We try, no, we do not only try, we have our technical meetings, which are very often high-level discussions, in fact, open for the public. The interactive map is probably the most important tool of communication we have, because it gives people a chance to find out if they are in one of the sub-areas or not, and what kinds of sub-areas they find there. Every sub-area has its own homepage, which is, we put more information on as we are going. questions that are asked are answered directly on these sub-pages to have all the information at one place. We had online consultation sessions, in fact 90, between the 28th of October and the 5th of November. They were, there was a big participation when there was already a bigger public discussion in these sub-areas, and we had some with a very low participation. These online consultation sessions are still online and available and are seen rather often. The methodology we used for the sub-areas report, we had an online consultation on that, which actually was very fruitful. And what might be of interest too is that the consultation group of the AC2 is supported by BGE2. We have the task to finance that. This is actually more to read maybe afterwards, but that gives you an idea how our information activities have been used. What might be interesting to point out from that page is that we have produced a magazine. We asked journalists to contribute into that magazine. It's we pay for it, but it's done by journalists who are independent. And that magazine we circulated in a high number shortly before the sub-areas report came out, to give people a chance to have some background on what might be coming and how to read that report. And what might be interesting too is that we developed interactive story maps to give a lighter entrance into the topics of the sub-areas report. For example, the criteria were written down in such an interactive storyline. And I think that is our last slide, if I'm not wrongly informed. Here you find our contact information. We are available for you whenever you need some discussions with us. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you very much for this very interesting view from another angle about the same subject. And we're going now to a third view on the same subject, but then from something which, interestingly enough, Lucas Schwartz noted that, has been translated by BGE as the National Advisory Board and by BASE as the National Civil Society Board. That is quite a difference indeed in how that is being perceived, obviously, by these two organizations. Jo Leinen is part of the National Advisory Board, as it directly would be translated. Jo, could you also react on the difference in translation that we see from those organizations, and give us your view on how you see the German resetted discussion going now?
First of all, congratulations to Nuclear Transparency Watch for that 3 days conference. I think that's an excellent exercise to get a view how this is dealt with in the different member states. Now, as you heard from previous speakers, Germany wants to get it right this time. That was visible from this afternoon, Mr. Haverkamp from the ministry, as well as the colleagues from the two agencies. And indeed, we have suffered more than 40 years controversial debate on nuclear waste. I spent part of my energy and time to question whether this salt stock near the former DDR border was the right one. And as we know, it was a mere political choice and not based on science and scientific approval. Now, we got the legal act to have a restart. And in this legal act, which is quite interesting to read, what Germany wants to do, there was a new institution or a new body created. And you could see that I give it, and we give it even another name. I call it the National Citizens Oversight Committee, because in a way, we are the watchdog on the whole procedure. And indeed, it is a new body that never existed before and is a very interesting experience for all of those who are members. If you look the next slide, you could see the 18 members who have been chosen first by citizens themselves. There have been public conferences where you could apply to be a member, and citizens choose their representatives. So 6 of them are chosen by the citizens, and the 2 of them, you could figure them out, are representatives of the young generation, the girl on top and the young student below. They are students and they should connect us with the young generation on that national endeavor to have a nuclear waste disposal one day. Then we have scientists, geologists, of course, and radiation specialists who could look into the whole technical questions. You have representatives from churches, from other parts of society. So 18 people, a quite mixture of characters and the backgrounds. And I must say, in my long career, this is a new excitement to work with the National Civil Society Body or National Citizens Oversight Body. Yeah, what do we want to do? And what do we want? So our role is to be the watchdog of the best possible transparency and public participation. And that starts with the first dot: time follows procedure. Of course, we are late. I told you that more than 40 years we are looking for waste disposal, but nevertheless, we should do it now in the exact way and not hurrying when we have problems on the way. And indeed, we are questioning a bit whether these online conferences fulfill all the criteria that you have on the best public participation. We have discussed it in the NBG various times, and will issue a paper on criteria how under corona conditions we could accept such conferences. It should be inclusive, so everybody should have access. And we will observe really whether dialogues and debates, questions and answers are possible in this format. It's a bit an experiment, but some people and some NGOs are questioning whether this is being the optimal form to do it. Now, participation from the very beginning on every step. We have the sub-area report where we look into how BGE collected the data. As to say that not all data are public. There are private data who are under private secrecy, and it's the NBG who has the right to look into as well these data and be in dialogue with the public whether there's something missing or whether it's complete. Good. It repeats a bit open public participation, nothing behind the closed doors. Everything must be online and visible and being transparent during each step. Now, I told you that more than 40 years ago, Gorleben was chosen by a political choice, and now it should be solid scientific choice. And on ethical principles, look into what could have happened or could happen in a million years. If you look on climate change and biodiversity change and everything, we are looking really in a very broad spectrum, what could be the best site. Now, interesting in the basic act is self-reflective participation and enabling learning. So a learning curve. If we discover that things are wrong, we will appeal to the stakeholders at the end, to the Deutsche Bundestag, if necessary, even to change the law. But we are not yet there. But it is a component of this process that it is self-learning and self-reflective, and learning from the past mistake. This is more an overview of what I just told you, how this process should be done. Scientific nature, transparent, self-questioning, participation, learning, and accuracy. So what are we doing? We have the task to exchange and communicate with all the stakeholders, to bring them into contact if necessary. We are a watchdog to identify tensions and possible conflicts as the early stage and communicate that and debate it. We contribute to mediation of conflicts. If different stakeholders don't get into good contact, we are trying to help. We make voices heard and ensure that criticism and suggestions from the public find their way into the procedure. So nothing should get lost, and we take care that everything is on board and make recommendations to the political actors. Now, we inspect the data that are generated, we analyze them and report to the institutions as well. So what we are not, let's say, here is written a judge. I would say we are not doing the job that comes on the third dot. We are not doing the job of BGE and BASE. They are the responsible agencies to do their responsibilities. What we are having as a role is to be a facilitator, to be a watchdog, an observer, and let's say an early warning system for potential problems. Yeah, we inspect data and look on potential gaps and mistakes. And we have the possibility, as I mentioned, to look into protected data and look whether we find something that is missing in the choice of the possible sites now and in the future. Now, we are going to the sub-areas conference, which is the responsibility of BASE. As you could see, and that was mentioned, we will have 3 of them in Northern Germany, Central Germany, and Southern Germany. And this is now our task to evaluate the interim report in the sub-areas conference and make recommendations as well. Yeah, we observe the process and try to learn from it, to evaluate. And we serve as a go-to actor when there are concerns about the actions. And we as well, that is an important point, what we debate and launched just these weeks, a peer review of the process and an international peer review. So I learned that we have some 200 participants in this conference. If you are interested to be part of a peer review in Germany, if you have the capacity, then maybe you should contact me or the NBG. In the next weeks, we will select from different parts of Europe and even beyond people that could look on the German procedure, whether it has a top aggregate and condition. Yes, and this is what I told you already. And to be short, that's what I have to say on this stage, not to repeat things that have been done. It is a new body. It is a new start. It looks promising. And of course, nothing is so good that it cannot be better. So I learned as well on these 3 days from what people have done in other countries. Thank you for your attention.
Céline Parrot wrote here, maybe I missed the information, but your missions as NBG is pretty ambitious. And also being, she asks, is being an NGB member a full-time job?
Yeah, I must say I'm happy that I'm not one of the 2 co-chairs, because it is a time-consuming effort, and it was meant to be 2-3 days a month. I discover it's already more or less more than half a week, and the coordinators, they even have a week time. And now when the sub-conference is coming, and you saw on the slides before that the regional conferences are coming. Indeed, this is an engagement which is, let's say, not paid in a way. We get, of course, paid the costs, but it is an engagement of civil society.
But it also means that you're not remunerated for the hours that you put into it.
No, we get a per diem and 2 days a month. So there is a per diem and travel costs, of course, if we have to travel to Berlin or other points in Germany. But if you put it down to the hours we spend to read all the stuff, to discuss, to communicate with the wider public, it's just, let's say, $1 or €1 engagement.
That's interesting to hear, because that is quite different than what we see, for instance, if expertise is drawn on in France, or also in Sweden, where the MKG is an established body that draws on civil society, but indeed that also has hours paid. I thank you very much for this, Joe. We have many.
No.
Yes.
As you heard, we have a secretariat. We have an own secretariat. There are people related to all the departments of our work, and they have the main job to do to prepare us, to help us. But it is a new experience, and it's quite challenging, I tell you.
We have a lot of questions coming up during this relatively short session, and only about 5 minutes or 10 minutes to go into them. My first question is for Jochen Ahlswede, and it comes from David Lowry from the United Kingdom. He asks, what is the status? Basically, he asks what is the status after reprocessing of spent fuel from Germany. What is the status of the plutonium that is in France and the UK? How much is it? Will it be repatriated? And then how will it be managed? Will it be managed like waste?
Yes, the utilities in Germany in the past, until 2005, have exported waste to France and here the United Kingdom for reprocessing. The plutonium, which was separated there, has already come back to Germany in form of MOX fuel. It's irradiated in the reactor, so there's no separated plutonium left from German energy production, and that's my information. And but there are, of course, there's vitrified waste left in the UK, in France, and it will come back to Germany in the next years. One transport has happened a few months ago, but there are several transports in the future for the vitrified waste.
David asked a few more questions. If it's okay with you, Jochen, I will also file them to you later so that we can have those responded to in writing. Anita Vire had a question to BGE, to either Dagmar or I think it is for Dagmar probably. what kind of a position does BGE have? Is it a private company, and is its management is that or does it fall under the state? How is it being financed?
BGE is a state-run company, and we are financed by a fund plus in parts taxes. That depends on the projects, but the site selection process is financed by a fund that has been paid in by the energy producers several years ago, and that fund should be sufficient to have the whole process financed. At least we hope so.
But it means that BGE is a state company.
We are a state-owned company in a private organization, in a private way organized, but state-owned.
Okay, thank you very much. Astrid, for you a question here. When did Germany start its geological storage research program? And then there are a few more detailed questions that I will also shift to the written part that we can then answer later in writing. But when did the geological research program start?
Well, honestly, we had some preparation works on the identification of the needs before the BGE was launched. Then within the Federal Office for Radiation Protection, we started to try to identify research needs. And now this responsibility has for the implementing angle moved to the BGE. And then, well, we all, and this is one of the issues, our really tight and ambitious schedule. And of course, this was a kind of parallel. From the very first beginning and preparing the launch of the site selection procedure, we started to identify our research needs, and we started to initiate the first studies and projects in order to make sure that we will have available the required results when needing them for the implementation. We have now in between put a lot of efforts in this, and we have published a first research agenda in the last year, 2020. And right now we are really much putting efforts in working on more detailed the planning, and then we will publish it and discuss it.
Now there's a lot about public participation in these kind of discussions. You've explained this. And Céline Parot from the university in Liège, she's wondering what is the space for the public to talk indeed about such geoscientific data and criteria, and if there is space for the public to discuss that with you, do you consider that relevant? And if so, why, or why not?
Yes, so there are, on the one hand, Dagmar has mentioned that we had this online forum where we were discussing our methodology while during our works on and during our conducting the interim progress, the interim sub-areas report. So there was a kind of discussion on our way to apply the criteria, the geoscientific criteria. And then, of course, while we were developing the methods, for example, with the help of pilots, we have had discussions and forums with scientists, so technical events. And these technical events used to have open doors for public. So this is always has been now so far in German. So, and but we have no really closed doors. So we invite for discussing with us, and if we get some kind of question or kind of recommendation, we answer and deal with it. So
thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for that answer. There were two questions coming from Jean-Claude Autret over telephone, so we do not see them in the question and answers. And therefore, for Jochen, you talk about scientifically based decision making, and Jean-Claude Autret is wondering on what basis do you mean scientific? Is it social sciences or geology, geography? Do issues like population density weigh in the discussion, which is a more social sciences argument? And he has a second question that you can then maybe also take with you when you answer this. Is since Germany decided to stop nuclear electricity production in 2022, has the situation of that discussion calmed down?
Yes, thank you very much for the questions. The first was the scientific background of the requirements. So we have a process in Germany in which the scientific requirements, and I mean with that the geological requirements, are at the core of the selection process. So the operator looks through all data as described by my colleagues, and applies geological and safety requirements to get an overview of this first overview of the geological favorable conditions. In further steps of the process, when we have sites with best possible safeties identified, or with high possible safety identified from the geological point of view, then other requirements come into consideration, like population density and other criteria. And it's this whole set of criteria, and that's, I think, a very important fact. These sets of criteria are laid down by law at the before the process began. So it's not we can, in a few years, the stakeholders can change it easily or something. We have really a broad discussion. We had a broad discussion over a few years by the commission, which Astrid Goebel mentioned, and they made these requirements and criteria, and they are laid down by law, and they apply for every stakeholder in the process. So it's really a very fundamentally laid down process.
Thank you very much. Now I've gotten a few questions left over, but time is running out, unfortunately. Magda Todd was asking about whether you developed an information communication strategy and how do you select participants involved in public consultations. Those are questions which I'm also going to move to the written part, as well as Jean-Paul Lacotte, who was wondering why only deep geological disposal is considered and not other technologies. And questions also from Céline Parrot to Dagmar Dehmer about how civil society can actually participate in meetings, and whether you could give some examples. That goes to the written part. We will not forget about those questions. Also some of the more specific questions on plutonium from David.